Judge has the ultimate say. A lawyer can argue, yes, the profession has degenerated to such an extent that people strike outside. I think I remember when I was a law student, I was interning with a lawyer in the Supreme Court. One of the cases we dealt with was a lawyer who had slapped a judge because the judge didn't give a proper order in court, in open court. So yes, there are undesirable elements, but it is a judge's job to manage the court. Right? It is a judge who is the king of the court. And this is a question I've asked many judges over the last couple of years, saying, is it fair? I asked him, who should we blame for the system? He said, yes, lawyers are to blame, litigants are to blame, but ultimately it is the judge who is responsible. It is the judge's duty and responsibility. So both factors we should keep in mind. So this is just in response to the comment made by one of the participants. So our idea was not to attribute blame or responsibility to anybody by showing this data. Our idea was to understand the information. If you ask me, who should take the responsibility, I have no doubt that it is the judge who needs to take responsibility for the court, for the functioning of the court. Yes, judges need support, and that's one of the things I've written actually in our reports, that judges also try to do the administrative stuff for the High Court and the lower court. They should not be doing. In most other countries, there are separate managerial bodies that are created. There's something called the Chief Administrative Judge, in fact, whose only job is to take care of the administration of the court.
Is that even in the common law countries?
Yes. Even in UK, for example, they have now established something called the Court Management Services Agency. They take care of everything from facilities to management of cases. And the only job of a judge is to actually decide cases. So we need to adopt new methodologies. Let me ask you, what is the one new idea in the last 40 years that has come in the management of the Indian judicial system? And don't tell me it's the Constitution of 1950. Right? So that is a challenge. There have been ideas. Okay, there have been ideas, but it's not been revolutionary. Right? In terms of they have not reimagined justice or access to justice. Right? For example, why should judges be managing legal services authorities? They claim that they're overburdened, but they want to manage legal services. One, they don't know how to. They're using funds in the legal services authority to organize tree planting programs. Give me a break. Right? Since you asked, I'm telling you this. But seriously, judges have better things to do. One judge complained how he sits on one High Court judge, he sits on a committee that was deciding what kind of urinals should be purchased. Seriously, then he does not have time to decide cases. Right? They complain about how overburdened they are, but then in most, the Chief Justice of each High Court is the head of the judiciary in the state. He distributes the work responsibilities amongst 5 or 6 other senior judges. In one High Court, they told me that the second most senior judge in the High Court was the chairperson of about 6 committees. He was so busy that one committee met only once in 2 years. So how can anybody deal with this? It's humanly impossible to deal with administration and your court work. And plus, when I mentioned 2 minutes, you said, no, they spend a lot of time thinking about cases outside. So when are they spending time on administration then? They are not. So judicial administration has become an orphan. And the data shows that. Okay, so that's the other. So what can you use data for? We don't explore, as lawyers, we don't look anything beyond Article 14 violated, Article 19 violated, it goes against the 7-judge bench decision and so on. So we don't look at it. Right? We need to look at the system as a whole. Only then, So let me move forward quickly because we only have 1 hour and I absolutely need to stop at 1 because I have a flight to catch. So let me move to the next thing. What I mentioned earlier was that we focus on the citizen. Right? I told you that was part of our primary objective, that looking at the system from a citizen's perspective. You could say the entire case database thing I described is just showing what the system does, right? It's understanding the system. So where is the citizen's perspective? Again, I go back to Upendra Bakshi. He writes in one of his pieces that lawyers or legal scholars can never understand the mindset of a litigant. You can never go into the emotional impact that a case has on a litigant. Only literature can do it. Okay? Because you'll say, okay, he lost, he won. That's all. That's all lawyers do.
We don't understand the emotion.
We don't understand them. And he then goes on to quote Mahashweta Devi in one of her writings and all of that. I mean, this is their point. So we said, listen, let's attempt the impossible a little bit. Let's try and understand what litigants think. So what we did was, so we wanted to understand the litigant's perspective, because we are focused on citizens and citizens' aspirations and citizens' goals and expectations from a system. So that is the why and how. So how do we understand what a litigant thinks of a system? So we said, let's do a survey. Okay, so the methodology we use was survey. So what do we ask? And again, this questionnaire is also put it up on our website. So please go and take a look. So we designed a survey. We said we should cover the country because we are such a large country, diverse country, all of the usual stuff. We designed the survey to ask the litigants various things, right? So we found out first his demographic details: age, income, religion, caste, and I'll show the details to you. And then we asked, what is the case that you are involved in? And because surveys in this country, actually, conducting a survey in India is very, very difficult, and be very careful if you are doing a survey, and if you are relying on other people to do the survey, to conduct the survey. So we covered 9,000 litigants across 300 district courts, 300 subordinate courts, not district courts. It could be either district court or magistrates courts. 300 locations, 300 court locations across the country. So we asked them demographic details, and we asked them case details. We asked them what your expectations were when you filed the case. How long did you think it would take to decide? How long do you think it will take to decide now? Had you filed a case earlier, did the outcome of that case affect your decision to file this case or not? How much do you spend? How much money do you spend to come to court every time the hearing is happened? Does anybody else accompany you to court? Have you lost any wages when you come to court? Because if you're taken leave, then is it paid leave, unpaid leave, all the usual stuff? So we wanted to understand the impact on a litigant, okay, and what they go through. So we asked them various questions. There were about, I think, about 50 odd questions that were in the survey. And then we are a small team, so we work with another agency that, not a commercial agency, but another NGO that does surveys. We work with them. Now, how do you control that? Designing the survey is one thing. Specifics of the survey is another thing. What do we ask them? You need to decide. So it's linked to what you want to do. So you design the survey. So what we normally do when we do surveys is we actually do a pilot. We go on, if we come up with a questionnaire, then we go and do a pilot, see what works, what doesn't work, then we change the questionnaire, tailor it a little bit. So we ask the surveyors, how do you ensure that the survey is effective? We ask the surveyors, in this age of selfies, take a selfie in front of the court with the name clearly written there. We hope that the surveyor won't be so bad that he'll just go take a selfie and come back. That has also happened. So you need to monitor the survey. So we ask them to take the phone numbers and the case numbers involved, so then we can check through the website whether that case is actually the same person. Then we used to call them randomly. We didn't call all the 9,000 people, but we called about 500 people, said, well, the survey happened, did you answer the question, did he ask you the questions, all of that. Okay, so this is a survey. Conducting survey is very difficult, as I said. So we have done all of that to make sure that the integrity of the survey is maintained. Okay. So the specifics of the survey are there. Now, and again, if you go to our blog and look at, on our website dakshindia.org, last year's blogs, if you look at it, many people have written, including in our report, have written about the difficulties they face in conducting the survey and challenges that were there. How one of my colleagues has written a nice piece about how instead of calling courts temples of justice, many litigants compared it to a hospital. When you're visiting a relative who is pretty much who you're given up on, right? So he said he compared it to a hospital. That's the state. This goes back to understanding the mentality of people who are involved in the system, right? Not as lawyers. As lawyers, it's another job, right? We have one case, okay. Oh, we had 10 cases, matter moved in 2 cases, there are other cases. So we are happy, right? And not just judges. So what happens to the litigants? That was the intention. Then if you're in a criminal case, is it the first time you're an accused? Did you get bailed properly? Did you know you were entitled to bail? After getting bail, were you able to pay the surety and get out on time? Things like that. So we asked many questions. And then we asked the surveyors to observe if the accused are being brought handcuffed into jail. Because as lawyers, we know there is a Supreme Court case saying you should not be handcuffed unnecessarily. But you'll see what kind of data shows up. And so things like that, right? You ask questions to understand it from a litigant's perspective. And this is just the litigant, it is not the overall citizens, right? So I'll show you what we did, how we presented the report. Because this report is not necessarily a lawyer's report, right? It is for the general public. So we decided that this is a summary of the report we published. We decided that we won't have any text, right? So look at, and this is again available, this report is available on our website. Go and take a look. So this is how we structured the report. Introduction, who is accessing the judicial system, what are litigants using the system for, litigants' perception of delay in courts, costs of accessing justice, expectations of litigants, and access to lawyers, right? And then we explained, okay, these are just self-summarizatory things. So introduction was the only place where we use some text. So 305 locations in 24 states. We did the survey on an app, so it's easier to rule out the errors made by human beings in recording stuff, right? So we could immediately know what time, we should know, for example, what time the survey was conducted in. And now, because of technology, you actually know where that guy was when he was conducting the survey. Whether he was in Lucknow but claimed that he was conducting a survey in some village outside, or whether he was actually in that village. So you can map the GPS locations and all of that. Right? So this again shows how, it shows how, where all the survey was conducted, number of respondents and all of that. And then we said, we will just do, so it has socio-economic profile of survey respondents. So it's easy for anybody. And the media loved it because, we wanted this to reach as many people as possible. So it was very easy, and actually on our website there's an interactive design also. So you can go and say, I only want to see what women respondents within a particular age group said. Then that will show up on our website. So if you want to interact, that you can do that. So it's very clear our objective was not publishing a legal research paper, but it was for a more particular purpose, to attract attention to the mindset of the litigants. So I'll just show you a couple of presentations. So what are litigants using the judicial system for? And this is something I was really surprised. So of all the civil cases, 67% relates to land. Okay, does it surprise any one of you? Or we're all academics, we don't care. We read the judgments, right? But this is an interesting thing, right? Because it also shows what we care about as a country. It's land, right? And land is at the heart. And this goes back to the debate, and it puts, for me at least, it put the entire jurisprudence on land into perspective from 1951, including all the amendments. Why is land such a big issue? Right. It also, for those of you who are looking at women's rights, how many cases have been filed in relation to land after the amendment came on the women's right to property. Right? It's fascinating as legal researchers. It's amazing, and it's to my own disappointment, I've not been able to do more research on this, and I've been telling myself for the last year and a half that I need to write a piece on land. I've not been able to do it. But if anyone of you want to write something about this, it's fascinating. Please, I would encourage you to write something on this.
So we can get the data with respect to the HSA post 2000.
It's all, you do some more digging, but it's possible to do it.
Through the data. But
Yeah, you can do it. Not through this one, but through the database. It's possible to do it. Okay? So then, look at it. This is the other thing, right? It doesn't matter which income group you belong to. Land is still important. For the poor, for the rich, everybody. Okay? It's different when you look at the overall picture, particularly in criminal cases. Most accused, I think almost about 95% of accused, are people with less than 3 lakh annual income. And about 60 or 70% of them, and the data is there, I forget exact number, are first time accused. That is the state of our criminal justice. So this is all, for me it was fascinating because having read only, X was accused, no evidence, decided, first time accused, sentencing for example, right? I mean, what goes through a judge's mind and what goes through the accused's mind, is something that this can be, used for. The gender-wise breakup, then this is interesting, right? And this says a lot about our society, not just for litigation. Hindus fight against Hindus. Muslims fight against Muslims. Christians fight against Christians. Right? It's fascinating. Not just for lawyers, even for sociologists. Just look at the judicial system, and Ronald Dworkin says this somewhere else. Why do we study the legal system? Because the legal system essentially is a study of society. Right? And I looked at this and I said, what's happening with our country? We need to ask ourselves, particularly without, giving any political color to what I'm going to say, but particularly in these times, when questions are being asked about, fundamental questions are being asked about, various things about our society. Look at it. Jain, Sikh, Buddhists, they all fight against each other. Nothing else. It also shows, and link it to land. That explains a major thing, but also what kind of interactions are happening between different communities is a question that you can ask yourself, right? Then, same thing with caste. General fight against general, OBC fight against OBC, SC against SC, ST against ST, right? Then socio-economic profile of survey respondents who are accused in criminal cases. Look at this. Look at the annual income, right? Less than 1 lakh is 38.9%, 53.4% is 1 lakh to 3 lakhs. You add up the two, and you add up 3 lakh to 5 lakh, 6.4%, that is almost 100%. So, and when I said this, we had a presentation where a couple of judges came and all of that, and I said, this is the kind of accused, this is what our system is doing. This speaks more about the police system than us. That means, are these the only guys that are committing crime? Well, surely not, but these are the guys who get arrested. So there is a lot about system. So this is waiting for somebody in this room to write a piece. Please go ahead and do it. And you can go on and on. See, look at this. Never previously accused. 95% of people are first time accused. Amongst our survey respondents. And it's a massive indicator. This story of the hardened criminal who needs to be punished, which we learn in criminology. I don't know whether they exist. They are there in this 2.7 to 20%, but I mean, have we even thought about when we look at new legislations? We are only hearing legislation need to have more punishment, more this one, right? I mean, there is not even a debate about what needs to happen. But let's not need to blame ourselves as legal academia. Have we raised these issues for the debate to happen? Right? We need to raise issues based on data. Right? We can't blame the political parties. I mean, frankly, they don't care. We need to give them information, they will look at it. Right? So we, as academia, it is our responsibility to look at some of these things. Right? Handcuffing of accused during proceedings, 10% of the accused were actually handcuffed all the time. And now remember, now with all this video conferencing, many people don't get brought in. 10% in one is a huge number. Right? Even 1% is a huge number, because when was this judgment of the Supreme Court? I mean, in 1980s, if I remember correctly, right? So look at it. Yeah, look at also figure 12 when you have time. I don't want to spend too much time on these things, but this is only to show how we have presented it. Because for what is the question? For whom? Right? The structuring of the report, which Dr. Bajpai asked me to cover, this was not for publishing in any new Delhi journal. If you ask me, with a little bit of text, with someone's picture, you can publish it even there. But for the audience, and academia forgets it very often. They think they're writing, a scholarly piece all the time. But scholarly piece doesn't have the same impact unless you make an effort for it to reach people in a meaningful way. That's my suggestion on that. It doesn't matter that you need to include this all the time, but be aware of how you structure your report, particularly when you're using empirical data. Then this is the last thing I will show: the costs incurred and earnings lost for post-court hearing. Right? There are numbers. These are all rupees, 497 rupees, 844 rupees per day, and all of that. Then we try to calculate how much does it mean in terms of overall system, cost to the system, because of the hearings that are happening. We think on a very conservative basis, it's about 0.5% of the GDP. Okay, so these are the numbers here. Cost of litigant, and then the loss to the business. It's very significant. We think it's actually about 2%. What we did was, how did we arrive at this? And this is again goes back to drawing conclusions. We said we took the total number of courts in the country, 17,500. We took, on a conservative basis, 15,000. Then we said average number of cases in each court we knew from our data. We assumed that there will be only 2 parties to a case, which is an underestimation, as all of us know. And we multiplied the expense by 2, and this is the number that we show there. Right? And the number of cases, number of working days, and we came up with this number. And most of the government people thought it would be 2%. Oh, you underestimated. I said, how do you come up with a 2%? No, it's just a guesstimate. I said, no, I don't want to guess. This is what we've taken. If you ask me, you want a more robust number, we can come up with a more robust number. But on the data that we have, this is all we can do. So this is another point that I want to make. It is okay to be cautious when you're using data. Right? Don't be aggressive on data. Right? Let somebody else, if they want to take an aggressive view, let them take it. Particularly lawyers, and going back to dealing with facts and all of that, be cautious on data. It's okay to to take a conservative view when you're using some data. Okay, I think I'll stop there, and because it's more of the same. How do people find lawyers? All of that. But I'll stop there for this. Okay, let me go back to the presentation. So it goes back to the why, what, why, how, what, and for whom, and how we structure. Okay. Now we're doing a more interesting survey of following on from that is going back to case per population ratio and all of that. What we are calling the pathways to justice system, which is currently underway. So we have 1.2 billion people and all of that. So how many of them actually use the courts? Right? And we assume 1950, all other forms of dispute resolutions have been kicked out. It's only the courts. So we wanted to understand that. Like we keep hearing about Kaufman trials, right? We keep hearing about mafia dons in Mumbai, political parties deciding disputes, religious institutions, even in progressive states like Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, still dispensing justice. So we wanted to understand some of these things. We wanted to understand, this is a survey that's currently going on. So we're looking at 50,000 households in more than 2,000 locations across the country. and we are asking them over 100 questions each, 150 questions each, and we said no survey should be more than 25-30 minutes. After that, you won't get good optimal results. It has to be a controlled time frame. The idea was not to question the judicial system, but to understand as a society how are we resolving our disputes. Because one of the things that all judges say, and I think every Chief Justice says on the November 26th lecture, 60% of the population does not have access to justice. Who's responsible for it? Has anybody asked? Nobody wants to ask. But we want to test that. The 60% really doesn't have access. How many people don't have access, and what are the barriers, for example, to access? So that's going on currently. Some of the challenges, one or two of my colleagues have written some blogs about it as to the, introducing the survey. It's on our website, blog, so you can take a look at it. What they're trying also now is to document some of it by recording it on video. I'll come to you. Were you raising a question?
No.
No, sorry, I can't hear it. So that's what we're doing. But implementing the survey we found very difficult, because how do you, for example, ask in the local language, is your dispute justice here? Okay. So when you are doing empirical research in India and you are looking at surveys or converting or something in the local language to English, be very, very careful. Okay. And comparing what has happened in other countries to what's happening in India. For example, there's something called this World Justice Project. They come out with the Rule of Law Index almost every year, and it's highlighted if you have moved one spot up. We're always in the 129, 130, but media thinks if you move up one or down, we're highlighted. We forget that we are a constitutional democracy that guarantees rule of law. That's irrelevant. But the media likes it, right? And I looked at their survey, and they place India very low, particularly on enforcement of contracts and all that. The way they do the surveys, for example, it's very small. They interview over 100 people or 150 people in the entire country and put it up. They have a very structured methodology that justifies some of these things. But I think now they have reached 1,000 people, or they interview 1,000 people, and they interview some 100 lawyers and all of that. So when you are comparing those kind of indices, and drawing conclusions, be very careful. Even our index, right? Even our Access to Justice report. You need to understand the methodology followed by, if you're relying on an empirical research done by another institution, another individual, you need to understand that methodology. Don't come to conclusions automatically. Or you should go to the raw data and draw your own conclusions. Okay? So don't come to the conclusions that somebody else has made. Or don't follow the conclusions blindly if the conclusions have been made by somebody else. Unless you agree with the conclusions. Right? That's a different point. So that is the only point that I would like to make. But this is a survey that's going on. It's very similar to the Access to Justice survey, but it's wider. And the challenges were much wider. Right? And the surveyors came back and said, "Sir, we have interviewed 1,000 people. Everybody says there is no dispute. What do we do?" I said, "It doesn't matter. I want to know. If there is only one person out of every 100 that is saying I have a dispute, that is an important finding. Or if only one person in 100 is saying I have gone to court, or I have gone to police, and the others are resolving it using their friends and family, or going to the local political party leader or the Gram Panchayat person, that is an important finding for our justice system. Then we will know whether we should push for the Gram Nyaya as people are promising. Right? So this is all important. And just to give you again the challenges in some of these surveys. Last time when we were conducting the survey, one of the regional survey manager, he said he was going to incentivize somebody for doing more number of surveys every day. I said, no, please don't do it. I don't want the survey results to be affected. So you please be careful about what kind of methodology you follow if you're doing surveys. Because I noticed that in the seminar you have to go and talk about conducting surveys. Doing surveys in India is very, very difficult. Right? And it's very clear, for example, in all these political surveys, particularly exit polls and all that. We have done political surveys as Daksh, many times. We have done the largest ever political survey in the world, which was about 265,000 respondents in 2014. And so we know it's extremely challenging. and data is very hard to get. Plus, you have to be very careful that statistically that the survey is good. You have to design it properly, randomize it. Don't choose a controlled survey. Then the survey may not be good enough. The other thing, once you have designed the survey and you start implementing it, if you don't like the results, you don't change the survey or methodology. This is extremely important. You have to, what you should do, you should insist that the process is followed. You can't do empirical legal research with a result in mind. Okay? And I'll give you one concrete example. The first political survey we did in Karnataka, we wanted to rank MLAs. And in the first political survey we did, the guy who came number 1 was wanted for 3 murders. Who was ranked number 1 by the people in a comparative survey. We said, why should we even do this? This is what. But then we said, we can't change the survey or decide to change the survey based on the results. You have to only make sure that your survey is designed properly, that there is a process to implement it, and you monitor the process. Okay? And this is applicable for all kinds of empirical legal research. Don't get upset if you don't like the results. Right? What is research? It's examining the same thing again and again and again to find the truth, however elusive that may be. Right? So maybe you'll design the survey better next time and come out with a proper thing. So a lot of times we have asked ourselves, and we have got calls from when we were doing MLA and MP surveys, we have got calls from people saying, no, you have only interviewed people in this area, not in this area. I said, forget about that. This is my result. If you want, you do another survey and push your score up on your own. I don't care. Because your credibility is dependent on the integrity of the process of all empirical research, whether data, whether survey, or any other empirical methodology. It is the integrity of the process, and if you're able to justify the process, that's all you need to do. You don't need to justify the results. The results are not for us to justify, right? So I'll take that. That's why whenever we put out data from Daksh, even data that I'm not comfortable with in terms of results, I actually don't care. If somebody calls and criticizes me, I say, this is a process I follow. This is you want to go and check the process, please feel free. But results, I am not going to tailor the results for anybody. So that's why structuring the report is different from structuring the results. You can't structure the results. So if there is one thought that I would like to leave you with, is be very, very, very committed to the process and respect the integrity and maintain the integrity of the process. Which is why whenever I speak to many international scholars, they say data coming out of India is suspect in some areas. Whereas earlier India was one of the better countries in terms of quality of data, now it is not. Particularly survey-related data, not what the government collects and all of that, right? But survey-related data. That's why they don't want to rely on it. So it is very important to make sure that you respect the integrity. I'm repeating myself, but purposefully so, because it's important to remember this. There's one more project I want to talk to you about. Unfortunately, I can't show you any results because the government, I did this for the government and they are not giving me permission to show this anywhere. So I'm respecting the integrity of that process. Although I'm sure they won't know if I shared the results with you here, but this is important for legal researchers because unlike the database which I talked about, where we are only taking data that is available online, this is a project where we actually went and looked at order sheets. Okay, that's why I want to talk to you about. So what we did was, so the Department of Justice asked us, we don't know why cases are getting delayed. Do you know why cases are getting delayed? Why there is so much delay in the system? said, usual sir, there are 5 or 6 reasons that everybody says. No, we want a definitive list. I said, I can't give you a definitive list. I can only do a study and give you a list based on that. So what we told them was, we will give you a canonical list and we'll give you weightage for each of the reasons. What are the reasons? All of us know lawyers ask for adjournment, judges are slow, witnesses don't come, the police inspector is the chief witness in a murder trial, he is transferred, so he is 400 kilometers away, he can't come whenever you call him, or the officer has actually retired, or the doctor who has done the post-mortem is retired or is unfortunately dead. So these are all reasons for delay, right? But these are all anecdotal reasons. Really, is that what's happening in cases across the country day in and day out? So we said, okay, let's examine them. So we said, we will take 6 high courts and 1 subordinate court in each of those, under each of those 6 high courts. And so we selected a sample of 6,000 cases. And we said, so we took 6 high courts and 6 lower courts and that. And we fixed the methodology. We submitted that in the proposal itself that we gave to the department. So the objective was to arrive at a canonical list of reasons for delay in courts, and we were going to give weightage to each reason. What is the methodology? Methodology was to actually look at cases, right? Order sheets, not just. So what I showed you in the database was just time. That was just saying date filed, whether it's pending or decided, that will give you the number of days. Okay.
The respondents in this project were?
No respondents.
No, you won't ask any questions or anything.
No. This is not a. This is not a survey. This is actually reading order sheets.
Okay.
Okay, not reading judgments, but order sheets. This is not. Survey is the previous 2 things. There's no respondents here. So this is actually extremely hard work, we found out later, and I'll come to the point that I want to make. But, so methodology, we said, okay, we have to identify 6 courts, because if you want to come to see, you can take 1 court and you can come up with the reasons, it's easy. But then you present it, you say, oh, this doesn't happen in Delhi, or this may happen in Karnataka. That's a common thing that we say. So we said, let's compare 6 high courts and 6 lower courts. We said 1,000 cases, so total sample size was 6,000 cases. So 500 cases in the high court, 500 cases in the lower court for each of the 6 high courts and lower courts. And we said, for 10% of the sample, we will look at the actual physical order sheet. We didn't say we will look at for all the 6,000 cases, because it's impossible to look at the order sheet. And when I say order sheets, and the few people who have practiced will know, the order sheet records each day's proceeding. It's not the final judgment we see, right? So if there are 148 hearings, it will say what happened on each day. We wanted to look at each of that. Only then can you determine why something got delayed. Okay? So we said it's not possible to look at 6,000 order sheets. It's just impossible. But we will look at it if it's available online. But physical copy, because that means you will have to go to the court, seek permission from the registrar of the High Court, from the Chief Justice of that High Court, even if it's a subordinate court, and ask them for permission to show you the order sheet. Because technically only the 2 parties are entitled to see the order sheet. Otherwise you have to seek special permission of the court and explain why you are interested in seeing it. That's what is the procedure. Is a typo? Sorry about that. Designing the search. So we said, okay, what kind of cases? So we didn't want to take only one type of cases. So we said, out of these 6,000 cases, a particular percentage has to be writ petitions, particular percentage has to be criminal matters in the lower court, particular percentage has to be civil cases, particular percentage has to be cases that have already been disposed of, then some have to be cases that are still pending. So we did a full sample to cover all of that. How did we come up with that sample? We looked at each high court and each lower court and checked what is the percentage of cases. Like I showed you Karnataka, the spread, right? So if in Karnataka, when I see that the writ petition and the MFAs are the highest, and if I ignore writ petitions altogether when I am doing a search, doing this kind of a study in Karnataka, then the empirical search fails. Because you can't take only company petitions and then come to a conclusion on the Karnataka High Court. This part of the deciding what kind of search. So designing the search is not just for a physical survey, for a survey of respondents, but even for any kind of empirical research you're doing. So it should map the reality. Okay, it should approximate as much as possible to the reality in terms of the spread of cases. Then we had consultation with various judges. After we did the research, we called judges and lawyers from each of those courts, and we retired judges, because sitting judges won't come, retired judges and then practicing lawyers, and we presented our findings, and they gave us insights as to some nuances in each court. For example, I told you company petitions in Karnataka, it's pending for long as why? Then, being a practitioner in Karnataka, I tell you, because it's heard only 1 day a week, and sometimes not even 1 day a week, sometimes only once in 15 days. So those are the kind of things we want to do. And how do we report? Unfortunately, I can't show you the report because it's not available. But it followed something similar to what we did in Access to Justice. Lot of charts, lot of analysis in terms of bar charts and all of that, and very little writing, because we were giving it to the Department of Justice. We don't know what they're going to do with it. But presumably they're going to send it to all the high courts which we studied. But there, and come back to the question that our friend asked earlier in terms of who is responsible, right? So the findings, and going back to what he mentioned earlier as well, online, we found that in terms of uploading order sheets, almost across the country it's terrible. Right? They're required to upload order sheets each day, they don't. So if we wanted to do 6,000 cases, even to find cases with complete online records, if we had done it, we should have done 25,000 cases to get 6,000. Okay, so that's a question we faced up front. Should we actually do 25,000 because we said the sample size was 6,000? Do we want 6,000 order sheets, or are we saying it's 6,000 sample? Then that's a call we have to take, and it's a call all empirical legal researchers will have to take at some point. Otherwise, the task will become, it's a never-ending task. So we said no. If online order sheets are not available, that is a reflection on the system. So let's say we will stick to this 6,000, right? So that I go back to saying, once you have chosen the methodology, stick to it. Okay, you have to explain the process, but don't change midway, except when it's critical, and you realize that you have made an error in the process. So change the process if there's an error in the process, but don't change something to tailor your result. Okay.
So these order sheets were accessed both online as well as manually.
So out of the 6,000, 600 we access physical order sheets. So we went to the courts. So we had to write to each Chief Justice, seek permission. So one of my colleagues, he did a Bharat Darshan, all the 6. He went to Howrah, and looked at the lower court there, Kochi.
Both online as well as
Online you can do it anywhere. You can sit in your house and do it. But on physical order sheets, you have to go there.
Otherwise, it could lead to error if physical was not included.
Yes, if physical is not included, there's no. This project may as well have been written off.
Why then did
One second, there first.
So you just said that if there's a critical error, then you need to change your methodology. So what happens if once you change it, then whatever you have done till that point, you have to go back to the scratch.
You restart, yes. That's why designing the survey, spend a lot of time. But designing not just survey, designing the research methodology, spend a lot of time. It's okay if it takes another, it's academia. Is there any timeline? No. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. And we're dealing with the Indian judiciary. Or at least that's why we are concerned. What does another day's delay or another month's delay make a difference? We're dealing with cases now. No, but jokes apart, I think it's critical. It's okay if you have to redo some of the initial hard work, because otherwise it will affect your results.
It has to be uniform throughout.
Sorry.
So why then there was no similar equal ratio of online and physical? Because physical is 600 and 5400 is online.
Yeah, it is. But that's the objective. Again, it comes to what the objective is, right? So the objective is to find reasons for delay. So that's a question we faced when we came to, because we found that in about 15% of the cases, there is no explanation. It just says, so today, 23rd of May, there was a hearing, and the order sheet just says, call on 30th of June. No explanation. So what reason do you give for that delay or for that adjournment, or not delay, for that adjournment? Going back to your question, is a lawyer responsible? Is a judge responsible? Is a party responsible? It's not recorded. So what kind of conclusion do you come to? That's a qualitative conclusion you have to come to. And for that you need to take inputs from people who actually, so we said we'll ask judges. So if you ask lawyers, they'll say, judge, yeah, we can, maybe there were 100 cases that day, so he was happy to give, which is probably the most likely scenario. So we asked judges, and thankfully all the judges said, if there is no reason given, you have to attribute that adjournment to the judge. And they went one step further. They said, if the records are not properly maintained, you have to attribute that also to the judge. Okay? So if you are not uploading your orders online, that's a system you have created. We didn't ask you to create it online. Then that also you attribute to the judge. So it's an important thing, because that skews could possibly, that judgment, because somebody else could decide, listen, I'll take 50-50, 50 I'll give to the judge, 50 I'll give to the lawyer. But that's an arbitrary conclusion. So whatever qualitative judgment you're making about data has to be based on reasoning. If you're not reasoning it out properly,
Many a times a researcher has also to reconcile with the time frame of the survey.
yeah.
So that's why I think probably that could also be the reason why.
Yeah. So don't be ambitious.
600 was taken. And
No, don't be ambitious.
So that you said it was too difficult to seek order from the registrar
Absolutely.
and then to.
Absolutely. And it's unbelievable. So the one High Court said we had to place it before the full bench.
Yeah.
Then they said, oh, this is an attack on the independence of the judiciary. How can you ask this? Right? So lots of, somebody has raised it now. Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out to 2-3 points there.
Yes.
Like recently also there was a survey that these high courts are having this much of pendency. There was another report also. So in that the various states, like I had an interaction with a few judges also. So they were saying that what they consider to be a disposal is very important. Whether a bail application which has been decided by a judge is also considered to be a disposal, or only a matter which has been completely disposed of is a disposal. So the states have a variance in these parameters also. So whether if you consider a bail application to be a disposal, the number can go to any extent. But if it's a complete disposal of a civil matter or a criminal matter, it may be different. That is one thing which we need to keep into consideration.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it depends. See, again, in some states, bail applications are numbered differently. Okay, in some states they are not. It's part of the same matter in the trial court. It's criminal case, and in that you have filed a bail application. If it goes on appeal, it will get numbered separately in the High Court or in the Sessions Court, right? So it depends on which court. That's a question our friend here, he's not here now, he was asking earlier. So according to me, the test is it numbered differently or not? And the practices are not uniform across the country, I agree. So if you're doing a comparative analysis across states, you should be careful of this. Within states, it's the same. But if you're saying comparing UP and Karnataka, just make sure that you're not falling into this trap of misunderstanding what.
And secondly, sir, you were pointing out towards the time which is devoted by a judge towards a hearing, particular hearing. So it was around 2 minutes, and I have an interaction with some of my friends who are practicing in the Supreme Court. While dealing with the SLPs, a matter is decided within seconds, like 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 20 seconds, they often say. So they often say that the judges have already decided the matter, they just want to listen it within a line or two. So then that quantification is also very difficult, whether you have surveyed in that particular, with that
No,
particular
so that 2 minutes, we did a simple analysis. We took the number of cases listed before each judge. So average number of cases before the Patna High Court. So it was not very, so we just took the year, average number of cases, divided by the number of hours of the court. That's all. So there's no scientific thing, it's a simple mathematical division. But if you start going into nuances, maybe there will be more. See, there is no currently, and this actually, if you ask me, shows the state we are in. We are accepting something as normal. Right? We are accepting a judge dismissing a SLP in 2 seconds as normal. Okay? You go back to the fundamental principles which I mentioned earlier of justice. Right? Where is the fair hearing? Okay? Then don't admit it. Don't call for a hearing. Right? So then have a chamber registry deciding let them give reasons. Just dismissed. I'm not interested in here. Supreme Court should not hear this. Go back to the High Court. See, when people spend a lot of money
It's
coming to the
disposing of
Supreme
not
Court,
deciding.
right? Yeah. So that is my point. And the point we need to ask, see, some of these questions are uncomfortable questions, not just to the judges, even for us who are asking it. Right? Even for me as a practicing lawyer, to ask some of these questions, because ultimately this is a question we are asking of the system of which I am a part of. Right? And the initial reaction is to be defensive about it. But that's why you test some of these things on the touchstone of what, as a society, what we want. I won't even say constitution, because constitution is secondary. As a society, what do we want as justice? Right? The constitution may guarantee X, Y, Z. As a society, what do we want as justice, right? And how do we want it decided? So that is something we need to remember. And we need to ask these uncomfortable questions, Unless we ask uncomfortable questions, the system is not going to change or improve. And uncomfortable questions asked merely on a whim and fancy is not going to hold water. Uncomfortable questions asked on the basis of data is what will do. So this data, I have calculated 2 minutes on the basis of how many cases are listed before you. You have some other data, show it. If you are saying you are working 15 hours, please feel free to put the data out in the public domain. And many judges have said, listen, this is correct. But they also acknowledge that not all judges do the same amount of time. So then I will only take them, what is common? Common is all of them need to sit in court between 11 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the subordinate courts, and the High Court and Supreme Court, different times. So we take that. So you have to reduce it to something that can't be assayed merely as showing a point of view. Okay? The interpretation may be a point of view. Okay? But this is hard data. Yes, I agree it is average. Yes, I agree it is, it doesn't differentiate between, 1 minute MFAs or just issue notice as against a final hearing. Yes, I agree all that. But then why do you want to list so much? We are trying to put pressure on them to create a new system. Right? Anyway, that is Daksha's objective. But you, as a researcher, what is it that you want to show? You just want to show facts. And what conclusion you want to draw is up to, it depends on, your objective of that report and what kind of research you are doing. Yes?
Regarding designing the research,
Yeah.
you took the example of High Court of Karnataka. So like in MFA, there are 30% of cases, criminal
Yeah.
petition, 12% of the cases. So while designing, did you take the similar
Yes.
percentage,
Yes.
similar weightage?
Yes, absolutely. That's extremely
That's
critical.
very important.
Because you need to, and sometimes, see, you can't match it exactly.
No, it's
But
valid,
broadly,
but still.
so if writ petitions are 30%, if it's 27 to 32, it's all right. That is okay. But not, if it can't be too, what shall I say, too out of sync with what's happening. Okay, I'm done, and I think we need to stop because. But I think there are 5 more minutes. I'm happy to take any questions and trying to log this out. Log out of this. Yeah. Any questions or comments?
Just a very surprising statistic
Sorry,
that
I think she had a hand up. I think I forgot.
just a small thing.
Yes.
While designing the research methodology portion, were there some specific parameters on the conceptual framework as to what is actually the rule of law thing, apart from what we understand and study, like supremacy of law, predominance, and then of legal spirit and equality before law? Then the second thing being any specific parameters for the data interpretation part, like for the drawing of conclusions, and are we actually depending on this conceptual framework for coming to this data interpretation here? And
So-
thirdly, verification. Are there any parameters again for verifying if any issue arises as to the verification part?
So answering the first question. So rule of law is just a name we have given. Right? So in doing all these individual projects, we have not taken the theoretical components of the rule of law and tried to evaluate them in these parameters. No, that's just a name we have given, title. Verification is absolutely key. Right? The challenge we are facing is that there is nothing for us to verify against. Okay, in our work, because there is no other, there is no prior, data set out there, or no prior conclusions out there based on data. There are conclusions based on anecdotal experiences for us to evaluate. So what we are doing is we are verifying our process of getting the data and whether we are making any mistakes. And the other verification we are doing is through having consultations with practitioners, judges and lawyers. That's the verification we are doing, and there's a challenge with that. So some of our conclusions that are based on qualitative inputs could be wrong. Okay, but we think it's right, but somebody else could come up with another conclusion. Right? But that is as far as our work goes. But for any other empirical research you're doing, verification is absolutely key, right? For example, I'm practicing law and I practice corporate law as well. The companies do initial public offerings, IPOs. In Western countries, for example, every sentence that you say. So if there are 1,000 sentences in the document, I remember I was a junior lawyer when I was working in the UK, and my job was to take. So that was prospectus was about 500 pages. My job was to use Microsoft Word and to pull each sentence, and it ended up running into 3,500 questions, and give the backup for each statement. Okay, that is the level of verification sometimes in the financial markets, right? Because directors can be liable for anything that is misrepresented. So that is a kind of verification some laws require. So as researchers, yes, you may not need that extreme amount of verification, but I would say verify as much as possible. For example, if I am saying 50% of the delays of the adjournments granted are because of judges, I need to have a basis for saying. What is the basis? It could be my interviews with judges. But if you're only interviewing 2 judges, then that has no meaning, there is no verification. But I say the data is shown, there is no data available, or this is the data available. Who has control over that situation, and can we attribute it? So you need to go to the root, and you need to justify first yourself, and subject yourself to questioning by peers, in your college, amongst others. Talk to other people, then look at other reports that may have said something similar and see whether they have come to different conclusions, different data. For example, it's on, I think a few months, maybe a month ago, this Wiki Legal Center had also come out with reasons for delay in the Delhi High Court, and they had something different in terms of conclusion. So I immediately asked one of my colleagues to analyze the report fully, literally break that report into sentences and see is there any difference from the data we have put up. So there's no need for us to do it, but I wanted to see what they are doing. So you constantly verify. But verification is absolutely key. The nature of verification differs based on the empirical evidence that you're gathering.
So it is a surprising fact that in the subject matter of dispute, in the case of litigant, education is being shown as 0%.
Where is that?
This report here from the website. It says 0%, and as of service also it shows 0%.
Service? No, it is the nature of matters. So imagine.
What kind of cases?
No, that's the thing. So education, this is subordinate courts, right? Mostly service and education matters come in the high court. That's it. Because it's only subordinate courts. Service and education matters are in the high courts, writ petition. So this.
So, but even labor it shows only 1%.
Yeah. Because they may not have got, if you look at the overall, that's why, as I said, when you look at data, you see what the survey is covering lower courses. Immediately, service and education are out. So mostly they are repetitions. Industrial tribunals and labor courts.
Which is one point that you
Sure.
said comparative based subject. So you gave a list of this canonical list of reasons. So how could you said you didn't take any respondents in this study, and then how could you arrive at a list of reasons without taking any respondents?
It's based on what is recorded in the order sheet, so the record counts. If a judge is recording, I have adjourned the matter because witness is not present, that is the reason for delay. That is the reason for that adjournment. If the judge is written because a lawyer may dispute, but whatever a judge records in the order sheet is what is accepted.
Here it was not from
No, the last one was only, the last one was a survey. I showed it
Secondary data.
because it's a different kind of, no, it is primary data because it is what a judge is recording, that's what matters.
Okay, it was longitudinal.
No, it was actually looking at order sheets.
So it was not.
It is an empirical study. It is not a, I'm not asking judges. I'm looking at the case record. See, a case record is an honest, and this is Supreme Court has said, whatever is written in the judge's order sheet is final. A lawyer may argue that I never said that, but the judge has recorded it. That doesn't matter. Whatever the judge has recorded is what matters. That is the key.
Just a point here, but I think as a teacher, the statistics which you have shown would be really very interesting to show to the students. Say for a first year law student, I think this can actually capture.
And if you have any other questions, please feel free to write to me. I mean, my details are on the email. Any data related questions you have, please write to me. I mean, not guaranteed that you'll all get responses immediately, but you will get responses. Okay. Thank you.
Being a mix of both data and